Resuming debate, the honourable member for Stormont Dundas South Glengarry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am honoured to rise, as always, on behalf of the good people of Stormont Dundas South Glengarry in my part of Eastern Ontario. And here we are nearing the 2-month mark now of the Liberals' refusal to adhere to what they told Canadians when they came in after 9 long years ago, that they were going to be sunny ways, but the number one line that I remember them saying, open by default. They were going to be the most open and transparent government that Canadians have ever seen. After 9 years, here we are. Rather than listen to the will, the vote, the majority vote of the House of Commons, the Speaker has found the Liberals in contempt for refusing to turn over all the documents in their latest spending and corruption scandal. It makes you wonder, Madam Speaker, as I've said a few times here now, and as Canadians see this go on and on and on, a stubbornness, a refusal, just to be open by default, to provide the RCMP with full, unredacted access to the documents so they can continue and complete a full criminal investigation into this specific case of insiders getting ahead. It makes you wonder what exactly are in those documents that they're refusing to provide, that they are redacting, that they don't want the RCMP to see. The facts are simple. If there's nothing to hide, as they claim, if they want to be fully cooperative, if they want Canadians to be assured that the RCMP cannot be stonewalled, that they don't want to act as gatekeepers to information and documents and evidence of their own corruption and spending scandal, they would be open by default as they promised and just provide the documents. It is incredible that a government is here in the House of Commons refusing to do so. And by the consequence of that, nearly 2 months now, 25, 26 House days of the parliamentary calendar, at least you lose track. That's how long it has been that they don't care about their government business and their government agenda. Private members' bills are not advancing. It just makes you wonder how desperate they are to drag this out and avoid accountability. Because what we do know, what Canadians do know from the Auditor General herself and her multiple reports into this issue, is that there is a massive, massive amount of corrupt, inappropriate behavior. Think about this when we go back a generation. When I first started getting interested in following federal politics, a little political junkie in my teen years back in the early 2000s, it was the sponsorship scandal. Think of where we're at. The definition of insanity. We've heard that expression before. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Well, this is what happens when you elect Liberals. It was 20 years ago, the sponsorship scandal came up. $40 million, not an insignificant amount of taxpayers' money back then. But what happened? There had to be a public inquiry. People went to jail for criminal intent of stealing taxpayers' money for Liberal insiders getting ahead. It was one of the main reasons the Liberal Party of Canada back in 2006 was defeated, and the Conservative government came in with the Accountability Act to clean up the unethical mess. The Accountability Act was a cornerstone of the Harper Conservative government that was necessary after 13 years of Liberals in office. And here we are, flash forward here now, $400 million, 10 times the size, confirmed by the Auditor General. Projects over $50 million. And ineligible projects were awarded by Liberal insiders to each other in the Green Slush Fund. 186 cases of conflict of interest. That's not an accident. That's not, oh, I didn't know the rules. That is blatant, blatant corruption. I've gone back and explained before. I served in municipal politics. I enjoyed my 12 years in my hometown of North Dundas, serving as a councillor, a mayor, and then a warden. The number one thing when it comes to governance of a municipality, on charities, if you're on a board of directors, on anything, you learn about conflicts of interest. We call them pecuniary interest as well. You can't advance your own personal agenda and financial benefit on the board that you serve. You have to declare a conflict. You have to step away. You can't put yourself in those situations to benefit yourself. 101 of ethical behavior, of board governance, and particularly in a fund, the SDTC fund, the program has existed for nearly a quarter century. And it wasn't until this Prime Minister and his then Minister of Industry started changing the players and appointing Liberal insiders that problems started. And here we are. Talk about frustrated. Canadians are frustrated. The House of Commons is extremely frustrated because they refuse to take seriously the magnitude and the level of corruption and bad behavior. Here's some examples. Not only is the House paralyzed for the last 2 months because they refuse to provide the documents, but, Madam Speaker, the other part is, let's take a look. There's been several committees. I'm looking at my colleague in front of me from Brantford Brant. He's on a few different committees, asks a few different questions, does a lot of digging. We've asked repeatedly officials, since this came out about the Green Slush Fund, $400 million in inappropriate payments, where there were conflict of interest into the hundreds of millions of dollars. Projects that weren't eligible. How many dollars so far since the Auditor General's first report and second report have come back to the Federal Treasury? Not a dollar, not a penny. The Auditor General made it very clear. Projects were ineligible, conflicts of interest in 186 cases, and everybody in this House and in this country knows when you do 186 conflict of interest cases, it's not an act, oh, whoops, we didn't know. They knew exactly what they were doing. And here we are, years after brave whistleblowers came forward and broke the news. Couldn't take it anymore, this blatant corruption and inappropriate behavior coming from these Liberal-appointed insiders. It was an incestuous thing of giving money to each other left, right, and centre. Whistleblowers came forward, and we've gone on there. Madam Speaker, what has to happen at the end of the day is we need the RCMP to get full access to these documents. If we go back, I mentioned the sponsorship scandal before, in a history and a record after 9 years. The sponsorship scandal was the story and the issue that brought down the last Liberal government, and it is going to be just a continued stacking that made the sponsorship scandal look like pocket change compared when you add things up. Think about it. The $60 million ArriveCan program, where experts said, many people said, it could have been done for about $250,000 or $80,000 on one weekend. $60 million later went to one company, a couple people working in somebody's basement here in Ottawa, and they got funneled millions of dollars in sole source contracts, had nice little whiskey tasting and parties, and it's all about who you knew. And they did little to no work for any of it. How much of that's been returned? Nothing. We have the We Charity scandal and what happened there, where the Prime Minister's family was benefiting from there, and they tried to give the We Charity friends of the Prime Minister hundreds of millions of dollars during COVID in the name of helping young people get employed and be connected with jobs. It was an absolute farce and a scandal once again. And when it comes to the production of documents, there's the waste, there's the corruption, there's the inappropriate use of taxpayers' money. The list goes on in the last 9 years of many of those examples. But we have, when it comes to document production, which is at the heart of this matter, Parliament has voted and said, Parliament reigns supreme. Parliament has the right to ask and order the production of documents. That's what we did. And again, What did we do it for, and why did we do it? Because we want the RCMP to have unfettered access to all of the documents. And here's the thing that's interesting, Madam Speaker. Why is that so important? Look back again at the behaviour of this Liberal government. It was the Prime Minister, when he fired the first Indigenous female Attorney General in this country on the SNC-Lavalin scandal. The RCMP said the case was closed, we're not proceeding, no charges. Why? Because the Prime Minister blocked getting access to cabinet documents. The heart of the matter, the heart of the scandal. The RCMP said they closed the case and they did not proceed with the possibility of, because they did not have all the information that they needed or wanted. And here's the thing. It goes on, the Winnipeg lab documents. In the midst of COVID, we had to call someone to the bar here, a very, very rare use of discipline in the House of Commons, because the Liberals refused to provide the documents about how they allowed such a national security breach at the Winnipeg labs in a time of crisis. I already mentioned the We Charity scandal. We got another question of privilege now with the Minister of Employment. I got to be so careful here now. He faked being Indigenous, but I don't know if we can say that or not. He pretended to be, and did all these words that we go on here now. We're playing word salad in the House of Commons today about what we can and can't say about some of the most preposterous, shameful behavior from the Minister of Employment and Official Languages, the member for Edmonton Centre, the first person to lecture anybody about their morals and integrities. Holy mackerel, the confidence of that man to stand before, lecture anybody when he himself, you should have seen the look of the Liberal members behind them. They are just utterly ashamed at the number of examples. Another example in 9 years of unethical behaviour, not following the wills of committee, of this Parliament, and obstructing the truth and access for information for Canadians to get to the bottom of all of these Liberal scandals. It goes on and on and on. And I see my colleague from St. Albert, Edmonton here. He and I have a good time on the House and Procedural Affairs Committee at Proc. Talk about blocking the production of documents. Here we are today at the Proc Committee trying to get to another question of privilege. And what happens? Oh, Liberals want to send it to committee. Send this issue just to committee and they can bury it under the rug. And here's what we have now. We have a question of privilege that was referred to Proc about members from multiple parties, all parties, where had cyber attacks by the PRC and nefarious actors, foreign interference, attacking members of Parliament in their personal email accounts and their attempts. And we learned today, as we were talking about motions and how to move forward on the issue, we casually find out that after the Communications Security Establishment, the CSE, said, well, we're not going to come back to committee. We've given you everything we need. Oh, by the way, we've got a substantial amount of documents left, and we're not sure when we're going to get them to you. The document production order of the House was due in the middle of August. They ignored that. They started dropping documents in September, and they quietly dropped about 7 more sets of documents. And then they only say today, months after the deadline, months after they came back to answer questions at committee so we can try to wrap up and come to some conclusions, oh, by the way, there's a substantial trove of additional documents that we haven't given yet, and we'll let you know by the end of the week when we might be able to give you a timeline for that. That's how serious the Liberals take document production. Accountability, open by default. Just at the very committee that now we stand here and they say 2 months, they shut down, they want to move this to committee, they want to sweep it under the rug. And I would say to any Canadian, just watch what happened today at the House and Procedural Affairs Committee. It's exactly what they did on the very similar question of privilege. The House of Commons, the committee ordered the production of documents. Set a deadline of mid-August, provide all of them. They didn't. And then we only learned today, months and months after the deadline, well, we got a bunch more coming, but we're going to redact them. We're not sure if we're not sure what we're going to give you. So now they want to trust and say, just take this issue on this $400 million green slush fund. They've provided all the documents that they think the RCMP should have. They've redacted what they think should be redacted. No, they've lost the trust of Canadians. They have lost the right to pretend to have any sort of maturity or trust or judgment when it comes in. This is like somebody being in a courtroom, accused of a crime, and then getting to decide what information the jury sees. People laugh. They shake their head. This is exactly what is happening here. And let's be clear, the behavior in asking the RCMP to look at criminal intent and to do a criminal investigation, which they said is open and ongoing, by the way, is into their behavior. So, yep, it is absolutely right. We look at the history and the conduct of this Liberal government for the last 9 years. Canadians do not trust them. So the House of Commons has stepped in, which it has the absolute right to do, and said provide all the documents, unredacted, all of them to the RCMP. They could take a look at them and make the determination, and Canadians can know. Only then can they know. Once we know all the documents they've given there, full access, not what they want to give, not what's unredacted, only then can Canadians maybe start to feel like justice is being done in this country. Full investigations into criminal intent. Because why, Madam Speaker? Corruption, putting insiders ahead of each other, 186 cases of conflict of interest, $50 million in projects that were ineligible. For a country who had money growing on trees, that still would not be appropriate. But here we are now, massive, endless deficits in this country. Food bank use at a record high, 2 million visits to food banks every month. Housing costs have doubled. Our immigration system is in shambles. People are finding it harder than ever before to make ends meet. Have a little bit of money left over at the end of the day for Christmas presents. Homelessness, tent encampments by the thousands have exploded in this country. Canadians are worse off undoubtedly after 9 years. But Madam Speaker, what I'll tell you is, for all that ache and all that pain and all that strain that millions of Canadians are under already, simply by their inflationary policies of doubling the national debt, 40-year high inflation, record high rent, mortgages, housing costs, down payments, you name it. To have a Canadian anywhere in this country hurting, struggling under the weight and the record of this Liberal NDP government, to see them sit there and take $400 million of money that is sent by Canadians to Ottawa, not to help get people food on their own table without needing to go to a food bank, without addressing healthcare lineups and the crisis that's in there, our mental health and addictions crisis this country's facing. Housing, nope. $400 million went to Liberal insider friends to benefit them. We see companies, including the Environment Minister and the very company he worked for, and getting board appointments into the company, giving themselves money in all these conflict of interest cases, and then seeing the value of their companies increase by tens, if not hundreds, of millions of dollars, putting themselves ahead. Canadians are frustrated at what has happened under this record, the cost of living that they face in there, and when they see the books and when they see the finances and they see the little regard the Liberals have for taxpayers' money, and instead putting Liberal insiders first, they are disgusted and they're ashamed of the conduct of their government. They are already hurting, and it is another jab, another kick when Canadians are already down, that they go and just blow a casual $400 million. Auditor General Report 1, Auditor General Report number 2, and guess what? How many committee meetings over and over and over again, demanding accountability, demanding this money that never should have went out the door in the first place, never should have went out in the first place. Any of it coming back. Years later, multiple whistleblowers. We've been talking about this for a month and a half, nearly 2 months in the House of Commons, and not a single dollar has even come back yet. Madam Speaker, I am proud to stand on behalf of the people of Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry to say again, the Liberals, be the open by default you promised to Canadians 9 years ago. Give all the documents unredacted to the RCMP. It's time for accountability, and it's time to put the trust not in them, but in law enforcement in this country to look into their conduct. Thank you.